Good morning, everybody who's watching, and welcome to a Socialist Telly special looking at the election results from last night, as far as we know them at the minute. And I'm Steve from Squawk Box. I've got my colleague Demo with me, and I'm going to hand over to Demo to give us his quick recap on what's happened so far.
Wow, yeah, thanks, Steve. It's the morning after the night before, and we were to be honest, we were not expecting great things from Labour last night, but quite how catastrophically bad things have unfolded and are still unfolding is utterly breathtaking. I think some serious questions have to be asked about what has led up to this, how people have responded, the different situations in different areas of the country, and the ramifications ultimately of this, with the Conservatives having done so well at Labour's expense, that the way they're running the country these days, how much more they think they can get away with what they're doing with the poor way they're running the country with regards to COVID and the cronyism, the corruption. They've just been given license to carry on with it and go even harder and even faster. And speaking of even harder and even faster, the commentary from Labour figures this morning is one of absolutely no contrition whatsoever, still blaming the previous leadership and doubling down and knuckling down. And if that's the attitude they're going to take, then I fear that the purges that we've been seeing within the Labour Party, the attacks on the left, are going to be ramped up even harder and even faster. And I fear, as much as I think Keir Starmer really needs to look at himself, look at his conduct, look at his own leadership, and ask serious questions about whether he ought to continue or not, I fear that he's not going to do that. And I think the voices and the people he's surrounded himself with are going to be patting him on the back regardless. And this is things are only going to get worse for Labour the longer this continues.
Yeah, not much I could disagree with there, mate, sadly. I mean, let's have a quick look at what the the kind of flagship result from the night was. We saw that the Tories won the Hartlepool election. They didn't just win the Hartlepool election; they absolutely destroyed Labour in the what's passing for Labour at the moment in the Hartlepool by-election. So these are the headline numbers from the last 6 elections in Hartlepool, and we saw Labour's numbers there. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn won a kind of record victory there pretty much in the 2017 election in the Corbyn surge. Still did pretty well in historical terms in 2019 in the kind of pure voting number, and then fell almost by half in 2021. And yet still they're managing to, be shameless enough to blame Jeremy Corbyn for the result. Well, Jeremy Corbyn's result in 2019 was twice as good pretty much as the result in 2021. It's interesting, given he's not even a Labour MP at the moment, the idea that he's the bogeyman that has caused this catastrophe. And, they might try and blame it on turnout, but blaming it on turnout doesn't really work because, as you can see, the Conservatives gained 23 points, and I think you said that was a record, Demo. Labour lost 9 percentage points from its 2019 vote. And, again, you can't say with the claim that this new leadership and it's still somehow Corbyn's fault. Well, 2019 was a disaster, sabotage-driven disaster caused by the Labour right, no doubt. But we still managed to do 9 points better than than we've done now. And I think a big part of that issue, is just this lack of anything, lack of stance, lack of opposition, lack of substance from Labour's current, I hesitate to use the word leader, but that's the title. And people didn't really even know who he was. And I mean, we also saw, which was bitter and amusing at the same time, Sky's chief political correspondent managed to get his name wrong, which just shows how bad things have got, really.
Yeah, I completely concur.
Hopefully that'll come up. There we go.
Sounds a bit like the arguments we're hearing from Sir Keir Starmer about Labour having a mountain to climb. You're not going to have a recovery in just 12 months.
Yeah, a mountain to climb. Look at those. Ultimately, the numbers don't lie. That Politics Joe graphic that you put up before clearly showed that actually, even in 2019, Jeremy Corbyn got more votes than Ed Miliband did in 2015. So where's this mountain to climb? Because it seems to be more of a valley than a mountain at the minute. Because the figures for Starmer last night. I mean, people will argue, and you will get people arguing this is a by-election turnout is always lower, and that sometimes affects things. And Tories always turn out, and there'll be always all these excuses. But the pollster Matt Singh on Twitter put up an interesting tweet early this morning, and he put up the biggest percentage point increases in government party vote share in post-war Westminster by-elections. And the previous record, which has stood since 1945, was a 12-point swing to Labour in Bournemouth. 12 points. What we've seen last night was a 23-point swing, almost double that, to the Conservatives. Now, you cannot tell me this is Jeremy Corbyn's poll. This is absolutely ridiculous when the guy held Hartlepool in 2017 with a bigger percentage of the vote actually than the Tories won last night, and still held on to it in 2019. There's no excuse. If things were turning around, if Corbyn's, the way he led the party was so bad, there is no way on earth these numbers should have come about last night, but they have. Starmer has utterly led Labour in the space of just over a year to an absolute electoral annihilation. And it's not just Hartlepool that we're seeing this. It is getting borne out in other parts of the country as well. But obviously, this morning, this is the big result that's out. And I could not believe my eyes when I saw the numbers this morning. I really genuinely didn't think things would even be this, could ever get this bad. It's absolutely astonishing. And what's making it even worse, what's making it even harder for me to accept, is the fact that every TV media pundit and every mainstream press pundit and every Labour talking head that's going on the TV or being interviewed today are all saying we've got a mountain to climb. We're still trying to recover from the damage caused from 2019. Look at the numbers we've just put up on that screen. Numbers don't lie. Politicians have a chronic habit of lying. So make your own mind up who's talking rubbish here, the numbers of the politicians, because for me it's pretty obvious.
Well, and I mean that's Hartlepool is one little kind of microclimate, if you like, that people could potentially then argue, oh well, it has its own specific factors and it's not the it's not indicative of the results across the country. But I mean, just some of the other kind of results that we've seen so far. And again, bearing in mind it is still early. I think Harlow down south, they lost 12 seats. Dudley, which was in no overall control, they lost 10 seats, and 11 went to the Tories, so they gained one from somewhere else as well. And that's going to be a Tory-controlled council now in what should be, a Labour heartland seat, really. Destroyed by and large by right-wing Labour over a period of years. We don't need to go into that any further. But in Sunderland, I think they got absolutely hammered by the Tories and the Lib Dems. So this is not a one-off or a weird thing. There's talk here in Liverpool, where I'm based, that the result could potentially be bad enough that it even spills over into Liverpool and puts the Labour candidate under threat because of the way that the party behaved around the selections there, and a potentially popular independent candidate. The one area really that it looks like Labour's going to buck that trend is Manchester, where the talk is of a landslide potentially for Andy Burnham. And the one thing that's distinguished Andy Burnham, who is, let's face it, no kind of out-and-out left-winger, but he has stood up to the Tories over the issues of furlough, over the issues of schools, and being very vocal in actually standing up, and did a bit of a Corbyn really in terms of actually pointing out what the Tories were getting up to and the way that was affecting local people. And it looks like he's going to romp home in that. And the result won't be announced to that tomorrow, but that's the feedback that's coming back from the count. So it's, actually opposing and standing up to Boris Johnson and calling out the Tories on their behaviour turns out to be a vote winner. Who'd have ever thunk it,
Well, Burnham's certainly no left winger. I completely agree with you on that. We can all remember the 2015 leadership campaign where he stood against Corbyn and got drubbed along with Yvette Cooper and what's her face, 4%, can't remember, Liz Kendall, that's her. And I would argue Andy Burnham has learned from it. He's seen what Corbyn did. He's seen that, what offering inspiration and offering policies, a transformative agenda, setting themselves aside apart from the Tories, offering people an actual choice instead of different shades of blue, essentially. And he stood up and he stood against the Tories, and he has put policy measures in place. And I would say he has looked at the Corbyn operation and thought, yes, I can see how that's worked, so I'll apply some of that myself. And he's done so. And he's done really well out of it. And he is bucking the trend as a result. Because it's amazing what happens when you actually offer people some ideas and so, some pledges and say, well, this is what I'm going to do to actually make your life better. And it better fit Keir Starmer actually did some of that, because so far, and it's been another theme running throughout this election as well, still, members and voters alike do not have a clue what this guy actually wants to do. We don't. He literally has no policies on the table. We don't know what he would do if he had power. I'm not sure he would even know what to do with it if he grabbed it. He's like a dog chasing a sparrow down the garden. If he caught it, he wouldn't know what to do with it. This is what Starmer would be like if he won the leadership, won a general election. If he got in place, he wouldn't know what to do with it. His handlers would be running the show. It would be people like Mandelson, his mysterious focus groups that he seems so wedded to for ideas. And they clearly don't have any of their own. I think he must just go in these places for tea and biscuits, gets a pat on the back saying, you're doing a lovely job, here's a new bottle of Brill cream, off you go. I don't know what else they do or say, because it can't be anything to do with politics, because he doesn't have any politics. He's just purge the left. And all the voices are saying the similar thing today. They're saying it's all it's all Corbyn's fault. It's all these rotten lefties. All this talk of unity, that's out the window now. Mandelson's been on the TV as well. He's been saying, yes, it's all Corbyn as well. And ultimately, it's we on the left that's still hanging on there in the Labour Party. Quite frankly, at this moment in time, I am questioning why I'm still hanging in there. But we're the ones that are going to be in the firing line again. And they're going to come for us even harder and even faster if Starmer doesn't go. And I see no pressure on him, despite these results at the moment, to force him out. And that's really, really worrying for democracy in this country. Really, really worrying for the Labour Party as a whole, because we need an effective opposition. We clearly do not have one. These results bear that out. And they're bearing it out across the country. And it's going to keep unfolding like a slow nightmare over the weekend. And I don't foresee any, aside from Manchester, aside from what Burnham has been doing, I really don't see a change in that trend that we're seeing here in Hartlepool and in Sunderland and Harlow and elsewhere. It's bad for Labour, and we have to change, and that change has to come from the top. He's got to go. There's no question of it in my mind. He has got to go.
Well, I mean, two of the lines that have been coming out, I've noticed in the social media kind of commentary this morning from MPs and others. I mean, one of the ideas is, people suggesting that Keir Starmer needs to pick a fight with the left as a way of distracting attention from this and showing the party that it's under new management. I mean, for God's sake, he's had a year and he's done little else except pick on the left. That's been about the only area where he's shown any kind of backbone. And look what's happened last night. So this is, that's bollocks. And then we've seen the likes of Wes Streeting saying, well, Keir gets it, and it's the Labour Party. That people get that Keir is the is different, but they don't think that the Labour Party is different yet. Well, we've got a completely new front bench of anonymous drones by and large. We've got we've got Keir Starmer refusing to actually oppose and say boo to a goose when it comes to holding Boris Johnson to account. And people have had this year already, and they've gone downhill significantly, by nearly 50% from where they were with Corbyn, and actually lost 9% in terms of their the kind of vote share, relatively speaking. And the other thing that you hear a lot of is this idea, well, people don't know who Keir is yet, and Boris Johnson's very popular because nobody's saying who what he's been doing and really holding him to account. Well, for sake, that is that's the whole point, and what we've been banging on at him for the past year and a bit is for God's sake, stand up, oppose, say what the Tories are doing, and draw people's attention to it, because the media ain't going to help you. If you're not saying it and insisting that gets heard when you get interviewed on the telly or in PMQs, etc., then that it's never going to happen. So again, if voters don't understand where Keir Starmer's coming from and don't understand what a disaster for this country Boris Johnson has been, then there's only one place really where the buck stops for that.
Yeah, I mean, it would help if Keir Starmer's media messages weren't hidden behind paywalls so often. But you're absolutely right. It's front bench are a bunch of empty suits. They're empty drones. Wes Streeting is a perfect example of the typical Labour MP in this day and age. Never held a proper job in their lives. They went straight from university, straight into politics, and haven't got a blasted clue what an ordinary person's life is about. So him saying Keir gets it, he doesn't bloody get it. He wouldn't know his arse from his elbow if he was put on a proper work site or anything like that. We need proper working class people who represent, representatives in the Labour Party who've actually done a day's labour. That would be a novelty, because sadly there's so few of them. They don't get what it's like for ordinary people. They simply don't. Sadly, I think this is why the Labour Party is drifting so far to the right so easily, so quickly. How fast is all the good work and all the fantastic offers and measures that were put in place by the Corbyn leadership being eradicated and erased? It's just, the thought of carrying on in that vein was absolute anathema to them. Yet it wasn't beyond Keir Starmer to actually campaign as a leader in order to by saying that, I'll carry on with these, I'll keep these. 10 pledges, where did they go? Unity, forget that. He will come even harder and faster for us on the left, and it'll be us that are used as a scapegoat. And his empty suit minions on the front bench will just echo that line over and over and over. Rotten left.
Well, they haven't got anywhere. They haven't got anywhere else to go, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, Keir gets it is hilarious, because Keir Starmer wouldn't understand the working class mentality if it came up and bit him on the backside, and last night it did. Let's take a look at some of the comments that we've got coming in. This is from old mate of mine, Roger Herring. The electorate took a leaf out of Sir Keith, the abstainer's book, and stayed at home. I mean, that there's certainly an element of truth to that, because they were touting last night on the mainstream media that this turnout in Hartlepool was going to be absolutely huge, and that was going to be all these kind of hidden Tory supporters coming out, and that was going to be the reason why Labour and their centrist, tarnished candidate got tanked, and yet in the end the turnout was pretty much on par. So it was normal voters deciding that they didn't like Keir Starmer and what he stood for. We've got Barry Jones here is telling us off, saying stop talking percentages. The Tories didn't win Hartlepool; their vote stayed up. Labour's vote collapsed. Well, they did. Their vote did go up, but rather than stay up, possibly because of Brexit Party people.
You might not,
but Labour's vote certainly collapsed. So we agree, and we certainly agree that you can only blame Starmer, and certainly the People's Vote mob. I think People's Vote, as it operated within the Labour Party at least, was definitely a tool for attacking Jeremy Corbyn. It didn't really have a lot to do with a genuine interest in what was going to happen in terms of Brexit, because as we've seen with Keir Starmer now, he's tried desperately to kind of scramble away from the position that he created in 2019 of this, pro-referendum, stop Brexit at all costs kind of position, which was the opposite of where Labour was in 2017 when they did well. Emily, bringing up that sort of people are using the term electile dysfunction, made me laugh this morning. Reminds me of a comment by Rachel Swindon where she saw Keir Starmer on the seafront in his standing looking awkward next to somebody with an ice cream or whatever. Yes. And she said, what was it? An untimely erection in a suit. That's what it would look like if you could put an untimely erection in a suit, Oh, dear me. There's not much to laugh about, sadly. Anthony James here. Keir Starmer's destroyed the Labour Party. He knew what he was doing. If he doesn't go now, Labour's finished. I mean, what do you think of that? The thing that shocked me this morning, to be honest, is the fact that people are, even people like Diane Abbott have been saying Keir Starmer needs to change direction. I mean, I can't see that there's any salvaging the position with him in the driving seat, really.
He needs
change
to go.
Direction or not.
He needs to go, and the left of the party need to be saying that, because if the shoe was on the other foot, and let's face it, the shoe was on the other foot. The right didn't give Corbyn 13 months as Starmer has had before he's faced an electoral test. They gave him 9 months, and they mounted a coup against him, for heaven's sake. if the left do not stand up for left members, then where are we? We're being persecuted. We've been purged. We're going to get picked on even more. This kind of hand-wringing that we've seen from left figures today is not good enough. It's not going to keep people in the party thinking, if you're not going to stand up for us when we're going to be blamed for all of this, then why should we support you? Come on, this is what it's all about. Ultimately, you want our support. You want us to elect you. You want us to put you in power. Then back us up as well. I mean, you're talking about your own membership here, feeling affronted and assaulted, and that's got to end. But the language we're hearing from the right on the TV today is that they're going to go harder and faster on us because we're going to be blamed for it. It's not fair. It's not right. And why should people stay in Labour if that's the way you're going to approach this? You've got to be harder. You've got to be firmer. You've got to be holding his feet to the fire. We need left voices holding their feet to the fire, because otherwise he's going to continue to destroy the Labour Party, as other people have implied. And of course, there is that ongoing conspiracy theory going about. I don't know if so much of it is a conspiracy theory. Is that rude to call it that? But he's actually a Tory plant, and his sole purpose in the role is to actually destroy the Labour Party. Whether it is or it isn't, he's doing a bang-up job of doing just that.
Yes, and again, I mean, the thing with West Streeting, a lot of people pointed out that in 2019, I'm trying to remember which election it was, but when Jeremy Corbyn's leadership was perceived as not going too well, and was overturned in the 2017 surge, really, to the stunned kind of bemusement of a lot of the right wingers. But at that point, West Streeting was saying the Labour should be romping this and winning seats and taking territory, and there's absolutely no excuse, and Jeremy's got to go. And then just now he's been making excuses for why Labour's doing so badly, and people have rightly been pointing that out. I mean, this is again a comment here from you made Jeff Thomas get a chuckle with your comment about sparrows and dogs. Again, from Roger Herring, 150,000 dead and the Tory vote goes up. Imagine how well they would have done if Boris had managed to kill 300,000. Well, I'm not. I get the point. I'm not sure. The problem is 150,000 dead should be enough to see Boris Johnson in jail. Never mind not in office. But you've got to, when you've got the media is run by the Tories now, essentially, so-called mainstream media. Then if the Labour leadership is not standing up and back and refusing to talk about anything else but the murderous goings on, then people are going to be fooled. And as soon as you get a bit of a kind of feel-good factor coming from the virus and a bit of lifting the lockdown, the Tories are going to benefit. So, if the Labour leadership is not doing its job on that, then there's only one place to point the finger, frankly.
The minister is on your side, and you're not doing a good enough job at holding the Tories to account. Because ultimately, as you say, we have such a massively Tory-centric media in this mainstream media in this country that if they're praising you and you're able to write columns for them and all the rest of it, then you're clearly not holding the Tories to account. Starmer blatantly isn't holding the Tories to account, and he keeps getting these columns in the Times or the Telegraph or wherever else he's writing behind his blasted paywalls, rather than actually addressing people in a way that everyone can engage with. It's there aren't words for it. There aren't.
Yeah, this comment in from Adam pointing out that the Labour right's already trying to spin, as we've been discussing. But does reconnect with British people in Keir Starmer's mind mean more group think tank flag shagging rhetoric? Probably yes. And I did see somebody pose the question this morning, and I'm not entirely sure that they were being hypothetical about if Starmer thinks this is what the working class want, and he hasn't managed to connect with them yet. Then what's next? Fascism? Is that are they going to swing that far to the right to try to?
Well, his flag. He said he's going to need a bigger flag, isn't he?
Yeah.
Sadly, that's
bigger something else for Bill Shaggy probably as well. But,
Oh, I know, patriotism and pints. Let's see how many times I can be pictured holding a pint in my hand. They're always full.
I was going to say, if you're going to try and persuade people that you're a pub goer, then
drink out of it. Exactly.
Take the head off at least.
Yes, that's it.
But, a bit of foam on the top lip or something.
I said, has he got a drink?
Yeah, people praising Thelma Walker for doing a great job from a start to nothing. I mean, I haven't seen the result in enough detail yet, but Thelma's a friend of the programme and was standing in Hartlepool as a socialist. one of the fears I think there was that the
votes.
Sorry, Matt?
I think it was 250 votes she got when I looked at it.
Yeah.
It was,
but people were, the fear was that Labour were going to try and blame her for their loss, but the
there's no
margin
way.
is that catastrophic. There's no way that they can pin that on the Northern Independence Party, etc. Crikey. Would never have thought this is all brutal but true. Would never have thought 2 months back that Cummings would have had a more detrimental effect on the Tories than with a blog post than Keir Starmer's had in 13 months.
True.
Again, the clues in the job title: leader of the opposition, do some opposing.
And you can't help thinking that Cummings has still got he's still sitting on a little nest egg of stuff he could leak out yet. But again, I don't know if it's ever going to damage the Conservatives. Nothing ever seems to Johnson. But what's right?
This one's interesting because one of the comments that's been coming through is that Labour, Labour's ground game, Labour lost on the ground in Hartlepool because they didn't have enough people willing to go out and hit the doors, and talk to people in the markets and all this kind of stuff. There's really only there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that half of them aren't in the party now because they've either left or been kicked out, and the other half is that Starmer's on the one hand presented no vision, but on the other hand, absolutely, if he'd shown half the eagerness to attack Boris Johnson that he has done in terms of attacking free speech and members, then you might have a more motivated Labour Party. And Ray's comment here, are we going to be able to discuss this disaster in Bradshaw CLP meetings, referring back to obviously, the bans that have been issued on talking at various kind of topics that Keir Starmer and his acting henchman David Evans didn't want to see discussed among members, and giving people no option.
Well, I'm doing that in a CLP meeting. I don't like that sort of business at all. I think David Evans is well overreaching himself.
Sue agrees with you, hanging on to a Labour membership by a thread. It'd be interesting to see this morning whether they see another, few tens of thousands drop off on the membership because of the, sheer disgust and disheartenment over the, the way that the party's behaved and the way that the leadership is conducting itself. Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire, but is that doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. Jeff, again, when you alienate the foot soldiers, the only army left are the school prefects. That's you can't argue with that much, can you? Really?
Perfect analogy.
Starmer and Co. Perfect examples of the none so blind as those who will not see. I did hear a comment yesterday, which I must admit I thought was comment of the day, probably the bland leading the bland, and I think that that's a lot of people angry with the People's Vote campaign and the which was the tool used to leave a Corbyn out and put the right back into disastrous effect.
Yep.
Some people are harking back to Tony Blair. Well, I think, yes, Martin, you've got a point there about killing the Labour movement, but it did make a resurgence 5-6 years ago, and now we're seeing it being slaughtered and dismantled, and quite intentionally so as well. I think and I can't see that there's any accident in this or any unintended consequences. They were prepared to live, to carry this cost in order to get rid of Corbyn, and that's the establishment on either side of the house, and all parts of the so-called mainstream media. Robbie is very annoyed, let's say. Cuckoo and his band of jackals. That's reference to Keir Starmer and his front bench. We're getting some good phrases getting coined here. I think these will see some mileage. Well, you do have to wonder if Keir had the authority to, kind of order out the gunboats, whether we'd be seeing them selling on Hartlepool at the minute. You'd have to wonder on it.
No, you can't help but think he might have dressed up in military uniform and saluted them as they headed off to bloody France, could you?
Yeah.
But it's that's the sort of thought that you associate with him. Is just supporting these blasted Tories and not opposing them. And I can't help but think, if you're going to support the party in government so much as he has, then why are people not going to support the party in government as well? Has he not just completely stuffed himself up and his own electoral chances by constantly supporting the party in charge. People are just going to say, well, if he's supporting the party in charge, I should support the party in charge as well. You know, how much has he actually contributed to the Conservative surge? It's a valid question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not one anybody can actually answer, in any sort of measurable way, but you can't help but think it has some sort of an influence when there is no opposition of essentially just two parties, sort of one supporting and one governing.
But there's this bizarre idea that, when you've got a national catastrophe or crisis going on, you can't be seen to be attacking the government. The government were the freaking catastrophe. and continue to be, and not just in the pandemic, but I mean, the 150,000 that died in the pandemic, is well known now. But there was 150,000 or thereabouts had already been killed by Tory policies previous to that, and probably worse. Suicide rates had gone up. What was it? Horrendous stat, if I remember correctly, 46% or something of disabled people that either attempted or contemplated suicide. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. Still when we were under Cameron.
Yeah,
and and it's only got worse since then. So what the Tories are the catastrophe, and Boris Johnson in the pandemic has been the crisis, and has driven the crisis. And we've seen again, and I'll keep harking back to this: New Zealand 26. The total number of deaths in the pandemic in New Zealand, an island nation like us, but with a government that actually responded and thought, what, zero COVID, that's the way. And my daughter's a netball fan, and she was watching the netball the other day, and it was in Australia, which again has had a similarly kind of strict response to this.
Yeah,
and they've got people just sitting in crowds on the benches watching the netball matches. They're going to their sporting events as normal. They're having their school events as normal. They're having their parties as normal, and that because they actually took this seriously in the first place and didn't have this idiot in charge that we've been landed with. Again, and an opposition leader that's scared to call him an idiot. I mean, that's the long and short of it, really.
Yeah, but simple fact of the matter is these are island nations that have shown the way, and we as an island nation have shown exactly how not to do it. And in a time of crisis, actually, I think Keir Starmer's got it completely wrong. In a time of crisis, a government needs to be held to account more than ever to ensure that it's doing everything it absolutely can to resolve that crisis as expeditely and as effectively and in the interest of the public as it can. And he has not done that. He's given them a free pass the entire time. The man it's sad that as a member of this party, I could continue to relentlessly attack this guy all day for hours on end because there's just so much to pick on him for. He's simply the worst leader at the worst time. And our party is going down the tubes as a result of it. And if the Parliamentary Labour Party are not going to wake up to this, there isn't going to be a party left, because they are not the Labour Party, as much as they might think they are, with the massive egos that there are in that Parliamentary Labour Party. As much as they think they are the Labour Party, we are the Labour Party, and you just do as you're told, and you turn out and post letters for us and leaflet and knock on doors for us, and we'll just treat you with disdain the rest of the time, that is not going to work. We're a party of collectivism, of solidarity. And if that is not being shown to us by the Parliamentary Labour Party, members are going to go elsewhere. There are plenty of other options that are popping up now. There really are.
We've had this comment come in from Hannah, and I'm not sure if she's joking.
I hope she is.
I presume so. What about Lisa Nandy as leader? Well, last weekend we saw Lisa Nandy get asked whether nurses should be getting their 15% pay rise. And her response was to say that, there were varying opinions among the nursing community and the NHS community, and with presumably implying that some of them wouldn't want a 15% pay rise, and she was only prepared to say that the government should stick to its previous commitment, which is broken, of giving them a 2.1 or 2.5% pay increase or something. And these are people who have more than 1,000 of them have died during the pandemic. They put themselves and their families at risk throughout this thing and worked themselves to the bone to try to save people's lives. And, over the past decade or more of Tory government, they've lost, I can't remember what horrendous percentage it was in real terms, something like a 12, 13% pay cut in real terms. So even if they got a 5% pay increase now, it doesn't go anywhere near putting them back where they should be. And a Labour front bench, in one of the senior roles, was not prepared to go on there and say, yes, we should have, a whopping pay increase for NHS staff. And that fits in. And I mean, it's a little. We probably should touch on it a little bit in terms of, we've seen Andy Burnham do a little bit of opposition, but pretty much otherwise on the political scene at the minute, the opposition has consisted of Howard Beckett, who's running for Unite, and we saw Howard come out yesterday and publicise after the polls had closed, because he didn't want to damage Labour's fortunes any further, that Keir Starmer had refused to sign a letter demanding this, back in the campaign for a 15% pay increase. Starmer's supporters have desperately been scrambling back to last July, I think it was, when Starmer said they should have a 15% pay increase. But, that again, it was a weird attempt to defend him, because all it did was show, again, how weak he's become and how, yet another screeching U-turn on anything that actually matters to working people.
Fire and rehire is absolutely rife at the moment. It's absolutely disgusting, and Howard has done a brilliant job of highlighting it, much to the leader of the opposition's chagrin, I should imagine, because he hasn't said very much on it at all. I mean, they've harked back to this tweet he made from last year saying, yes, I agree, it's horrible, it's awful. Well, why not sign the blasted thing that Howard is putting around then? I mean, if you're going to say it, then put your money where your mouth is and put your name to it. Why? What if you agree with it? Why is it so hard to sign it? Why refuse to sign it? I was incredulous at this last night, and Howard's tweet's gone viral because of it, because people can't understand that this guy can agree with this position yet refuse to actually do anything to act on it.
And his supporters have now discovered after the fact that Starmer's told his MPs to sign it. And but if he's not prepared to put his name to it himself, then that's gesture politics. It
just strikes me he cannot make a decision on his own. It's like he has to have his hand held for every little thing. Whether it's the focus group, whether it's his front bench team, he's got to run this past somebody all the time. He's not a leader. He takes instruction. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's every single little thing. He can't. It doesn't matter what it is. You expect a fast response to something, and the Tories have done something awful. And you expect, if it was Corbyn, he'd have had something out within 20 minutes on social media, a comment on it, and something like that. With Starmer, it's hours or days to issue some sort of response, and quite often it's pretty limp lettuce when it is.
This is from Phil. He's saying that we'll never win while the media is controlled by so few. The BBC is woeful and we're in a class war. Well, I mean, that's, it's true. The BBC is appalling and getting worse all the time because the Johnson keeps leaving more and more Tories into the key positions. But, the fact of the matter is that Keir Starmer has had the softest and easiest and most friendly ride imaginable from the vast majority of the media since he became leader. Certainly as a Labour leader. He's had his own free pass essentially from the media, and the fact is he's refused to use it, which is probably why he's getting the free pass, because they know that he's not going to make use of it and actually say anything that's going to upset their interest anyway. But you can't blame the media when they're being so soft on him compared to the way they treated Jeremy Corbyn, and you failed to actually oppose. And that's the key thing. They wouldn't have a choice but to cover some of it if he refused to talk about anything else. And the fact that he keeps going on with this loyally bollocks and, as though that's going to impress people, it's just mental, and well, I shouldn't use that word, but, it is appalling that he is prepared to hold, we talk about hand holding, but he's been holding Boris Johnson's hand. And on the occasions when Boris Johnson's dragged his feet on things like schools, Keir Starmer's been out there demanding that Johnson go further, no ifs, no buts. So he's done more than merely a bet. He's actually driven it along sometimes.
Yeah, completely agree. He's it's just such an awful situation. If he was any sort of a threat, any sort of a danger, the media would do to him what they did to Corbyn, which was absolutely crucify the guy. Frankly, they would look for any little thing. They would dig through his past, his history, if he was any kind of a threat, and they'd be onto him. And they're not, because they see him as he's one of them, effectively. He's not doing anything to benefit ordinary working people, because he has no clue what ordinary working people need or want, because he isn't one. It's just so frustratingly obvious what the problem is, but we're led by people for whom they're blind to it. The one thing
If the left ever retakes control of the party, we need to eradicate the right, as there's no such thing as a broad church when some of the parishioners are stabbing you repeatedly. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was never, a fan of the nicer kind of politics. To my mind, if you've got people who are dedicated to your destruction, you can't afford to be chummy with them. No. You've got to stand up, and reason with the ones who can be reasoned with, but otherwise, you can't afford to take prisoners on that. Politically speaking, you've got to, and the right wing have shown after 5 years of bleating that they were being picked on all the time. As soon as they've got back in control, they're absolutely, mounting the purge of all purges, really.
Yeah. They do it. Yeah, I agree. I think it was Corbyn's biggest mistake was to try and placate people that never wanted to be placated. And they're still there to this day. A lot of them still bashing him and slagging him off. He's still living rent free in their heads, as so many people like to say on social media. As far I was going to come back to that media point, though, not to keep trying to promote Howard Beckett too much on a show that's not actually about him. But what do you reckon of the idea of Unite setting up a TV station of their own?
Well, I think it's an essential step. I mean, it's the only way that, somebody with the resources like Unite doing something like that is the only way of getting the message out on a mass scale, essentially. Because, the independent media, like Squawk Books that I run, are doing what we can. But, there are limits. We don't have massive resources to throw into stuff. We don't have, we can't afford to run a broadcast, kind of airwaves broadcast channel. We do Socialist Telly. We have, the message, but the means are more difficult. And the social media companies being run on a capitalist basis and not necessarily, friendly to our message and have done over the years as much as they can to try and push back the reach of the message when it comes in, and has been, has been successful. So we saw what happened in 2017 and came very close to winning power on the back of the, the kind of independent and activist, social media winning the air war in that sense. And as soon as that was over, we saw Facebook then change its algorithms. Their explanation for doing that was some other commercial decision, but the net impact of that was, mass hit on the left media and the reach of the left media, which we then had to try and find our way around. And then I think it was last year that that Facebook admitted that it was enacting policies and procedures that were limiting the left more than the right, because they were apparently they were worried about what the right wingers would say about them if the right wingers could perceive, as they always do, even with the BBC, etc., that they were being unfairly disadvantaged, when really it's the left that gets stamped down on, and our free speech that gets hit all the time. Paul thinks it's a good idea for the TV. And Andy Falcon, or Falcon Andy, whichever way around that is, Paul Dacre running Ofcom. I mean, that's, yeah. Well, I guess the point on that one is that, as I understand it, it could be that Unite TV will run online in a similar way that apparently Rupert Murdoch has pulled back on his plans for his new station to run it online so that he can avoid the regulation of people like Ofcom. But, Andy's point that, yet more Tories are being levered into positions that are supposed to be run by people with some independence and impartiality is one of the great scandals of the time, and doesn't get nearly enough attention because the people who are doing all this are running the media and who are refusing to talk about it. Yeah,
it's an uphill climb, but it's a solid first step. As you say, no independent left-wing media have got the resources to compete with billionaire-owned media stations, but the trade union movement certainly could. So if they're prepared to do it, then it would be an incredible step towards levelling up our democracy a touch.
Phil's remonstrating with us here, said he wasn't defending Keir Starmer. I don't think we were saying that you were, Phil. We were, just pointing out that the Starmer's had an easy ride compared to the media and compared to Corbyn. And, that any attempt by him and his supporters to blame the media for what's going on, it doesn't stand up really, because if the people are ignorant of what's happening in this country, it's, a large part of the blame for that sits with the opposition leader whose job is to oppose, and has not been doing that because he's got this weird idea that will upset the British people. We've seen what the British people think of the way he's running the party. starting to unfold now since last night.
Mm.
So, well, we're getting busy with the comments. There's quite a few people pointing out that they've left the Labour Party. People getting angry that only 24 MPs have signed an early day motion put forward by John Trickett to get the NHS workers a 15% pay increase. Again, I mean, when it was 24, it might have changed since last night when I looked at it. But when it was 24, there wasn't a single Starmer supporting MP who had put their name to that simple early day motion, just to say, give NHS staff a decent pay rise. And
people don't sign them. I mean, it's just such a simple gesture, really, signing an EDM.
So it makes a mockery of Starmer's excuse as well, because if his supporters now claiming that he's been telling his MPs they have to, support Unite's campaign for 15% for NHS staff. Why the hell aren't they signing the bloody EDM, as Sue has put it here?
Yeah, she's right, absolutely right.
So it's been a busy morning in the comments. I mean, obviously, there's a limit to how far we can go in terms of response because the results are still coming in. But certainly, pretty much everything that seems to have come through. I think the only situations where councils have control has changed hands is from Labour to Conservative. We've seen, a number of councils now, I think, going from no overall control into, being Conservative run. We've seen this disaster in Hartlepool and other parts of the northeast where, that's my original home patch. I spent my first 48 years in Teesside, just over the river from Hartlepool. And, that frankly is an area that was absolutely crapped on for decades by the Tories, massive economic impact, massive loss of jobs, loss of key industries, the collapse of the steel industry and then the closure of the Teesside the Redcar steel mill, etc. That happened under the Tory government not too long ago, and we've seen, people so disgusted with the conduct of the Labour Party, are so meh about Keir Starmer and the idea that he might offer anything different, that they're prepared to vote Tory, and that I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of that on behalf of the Labour Party. I'm ashamed of that on behalf of my home area. But it is a damning indictment of how bad the current Labour Party is, and that people who have been crucified by the Tories for decades, not just there but in South Yorkshire and places like that, are prepared now to support them because there's such a lack of opposition coming. And as I think you said earlier on, Dan, if people want Tories, they'll go for the full fat version, not the caffeine free version or whatever. So. It's a sad day. Yeah,
I mean, I'm obviously I'm not from the north. My accent kind of gives that away a bit. But one of the comments that I've seen going around social media regarding the way things have gone down in Hartlepool, or were heading that way yesterday, has been there was commentary that younger people are turning towards the Tories because they like Boris, and they see Keir Starmer is another version of Tony Blair. And I'm thinking, well, is there a slight generational thing happening here, that we have a generation of new voters coming in who are voting in this way because they haven't actually experienced what older generations had and went through under Thatcher, for example, and why voting Tory was so anathema to so many places in the north at that time? Is that sort of turning around now, or do you reckon it is just the way Labour is being led, that they've just been completely switched off Labour and have gone Tory instead?
Well, the fear is that, as we saw in Scotland, do people look at Scotland and think that that's redeemable now from a Labour Party point of view? I'm not sure it is. Certainly, while Labour continues to kind of fight the unionist point and want to keep Scotland in the UK, which a majority of Scottish people now seem to object to. And the idea then that you could turn Teesside or South Yorkshire into from being a Labour stronghold into an emerging Tory one would have been unthinkable a few years ago, and and yet that's what we're seeing happen. As soon as we lost Scotland under the right, and I say we because I am still clinging on to my Labour membership despite malicious rumours to the contrary. We've seen Scotland lost under the right wing. As soon as the right wing gets back in charge, we're seeing, Teesside lost, we're seeing South Yorkshire lost, we're seeing, potentially even Liverpool lost, which I've always proudly thought that is the reddest city, politically speaking in the country. And, we'll see what happens with that. But, it will be astonishing if there hasn't been a big impact on the Labour vote, even if they manage to cling on to it. And, that I don't know if that's redeemable, to be honest. I mean, I hope it is. But I think if it's going to be, then something has to change right now. It's no good dawdling on for another year, giving Starmer a chance to turn this around or whatever. He's had a year of blaming, like the Tories blamed Labour for, and still do for the supposed, for the global economic crash. Then, we'll see Jeremy Corbyn getting blamed for everything, even when the results clearly show that it's got nothing to do with him, because the results were better under him than they are now.
Those numbers don't lie. Those numbers
if any
don't
Labour
lie.
MPs are watching this, and we know some of them do, for God's sake, get your act together and, pull the rug out from under him now, because if there's going to, I think the UK needs a proper, it needs a Labour Party, but it needs a proper Labour Party. There's no point in being there if it's not going to do the job that the Labour Party is meant to do.
No.
And, it's got to be a left-wing party proposing a better UK, proposing an actual change compared to what's up now, and pointing out what the Tories are doing, because they are making hay while the sun shines from their point of view, in NHS privatisation, in the corruption and scandals around the pandemic contracts and all that stuff, and getting away with it, and hastily dismantling the structures of democracy in this country as fast as they can go, with the changes in the number of seats, with the corruption of the so-called, kind of impartial media, etc. And, the longer that they're given to do it, the worse it's going to get. And it's only going to get worse if Labour doesn't have anybody actually pointing out what they're doing. And that's the situation that we're in. So I hope it is the structures and the resources and all the other stuff that's in there should be at the, there for the benefit of the working class, to do a better job in this country and to fight for change. And, as Bob Crow said, if you fight, you might lose. If you don't fight, you definitely lose. And I think we're not fighting. They are not fighting. The people who are in charge of the Labour Party at the moment.
And we need
so
them.
It has to be fast. Get your finger out, make the challenge, do it, now, so there's time to actually run a leadership contest, force one, and then run one before the next conference, assuming that takes place in September. And we can actually get everything in, get the acting general secretary out, who's never been ratified by the conference as the rules require, and give people a party they can believe in, so they don't have to then look at alternatives like the Northern Independence Party or the Breakthrough Party or the other places that people are feeling driven to, because there's nothing for them on offer from the Labour Party as it stands at the minute. And if they kick me out for saying that, so be it. But I want to see a successful Labour Party, but it's got to be a Labour Party, not this kind of shell and sham that it is at the moment.
Yeah.
No, we're echoing on audio. I'm not picking it up, so I don't know whether it's. Are you hearing anything, Damon?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you, mate. It's not a problem.
Not picking up an echo. That's what somebody was saying.
No, I haven't picked that up. But yeah, no, I completely concur with where you are at the moment. My Labour membership is something I have seriously been questioning for some time. It's, what am I fighting for when I'm getting no representation? It feels there's nobody standing up for the ideals that I joined the party for. People keep, Starmer and his acolytes keep blaming Corbyn for everything. Corbyn was a blip. Yeah, he was a blip, because we started winning seats again for the first time in decades. It was incredible to actually see a Labour resurgent, a Labour standing for proper policies and proper identity, and with working class ideals. And that's taken away once again in favour of this bland leading the bland. I mean, somebody described Starmer as a black hole of politics a minute ago in the comments. Thinking black, that's far too decisive. He's been beige from start to finish. But, it's got to change, and it has to happen now. He's been given time. He's been given ample time. We on the left gave him every chance and opportunity to make something of himself, set out a direction, build up the party, make something of us, and he's been found massively wanting. To give him any longer is just desecration of the party. It's dereliction of what you were elected to do, which is represent working class people, give them hope, give them something to vote for, work for change in this country. If you're not going to do that, people are going to keep leaving. Your finances are going to continue to get worse. And in a minute, there will be no Labour Party. And you will have sleepwalked into letting it happen. So stand up, say something about it, and act now. We need our left parliamentary representatives to act now, because it's going to be too late in a minute.
Yes, we have Emily still saying she's getting an echo, but we're not hearing it from anybody else. So I think it might be a local problem, but if anybody else is having that, drop something in the comments and we'll keep running for a few minutes because there's still quite a lot of people watching. Keir Starmer, a Lib Dem in disguise. I'm not sure about the disguise bit. And that the right target CLP holders for abuse and suspension. Well, I think there's no argument with that. But what we've seen in the attack on free speech recently, it has blatantly been used as a maneuver to, replace left wingers with right wingers at every position of influence within local parties, whether that's within the CLPs, the constituency parties where the members meet, or at the level of council candidates and stuff. We saw, Sandwell Council this week. I haven't seen results from Sandwell yet, but Keir Starmer had the cheek to claim that he brought in a new broom by sweeping out a lot of councillors and bringing back some new faces, and yet what we saw were the same old right-wing faces out on the campaign trail, and some of them, one who tried to join the Tory party and was rejected by them, and was recorded boasting of helping to find almost £26,000 loan for a right-wing Labour MP to make sure that she wasn't declared bankrupt and didn't lose, her chance to stand after she'd just been elected. And, and that doesn't seem to have ever been declared. So, again, the new broom in Sandwell in the West Midlands, which has been the heartland of the Labour right for a long time, seems to be just putting the Labour right straight back into power. And, assuming they manage to get themselves elected, of course.
We wonder why corruption stories against the Tories aren't gaining any traction when all of a sudden the corruption story dealing with Labour gets, brought back up, and there's still no answer for that. People just see that, as much as Starmer echoes the Tories, seems to agree with them so much, when he's acting like them as well, Labour under his leadership is acting in that kind of corrupt way as well. Again, it gives people no reason to not vote for the Conservatives when they may as well have the, as you said, the full fat version.
What else have we got here coming through in the comments?
The comments have been brilliant. Have been really quite.
Yeah, we've been swamped today. It's been busy. So a few people here saying that the audio is coming through fine for them. So it does seem to be a local issue. Emily, sorry. We stay in to poke the bear. This is Jackie. There needs to be a voice of dissent within the party. I agree with that. I think if anybody, is a voice of dissent, it's us lot really. With it, those who are within the party and those who are outside it now within Socialist Telly, we're trying to point out what the media want, and when the Tories or Labour talk crap and are allowed to just say that without any kind of challenge or questioning or scrutiny from mainstream media presenters, we try to hold them to account on that. And that's, if you want to support us, I will say then, make sure you do follow us, especially on YouTube, and a big push on YouTube at the moment. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, notification bell, whatever it is on the different platforms that you prefer, and make sure that you keep up with our output and share it as well, so that people get to hear what's really going on and not just the version that the Tory-run media are going to want to give them.
Exactly.
How will Starmer own this? What will that look like? I somehow suspect we'll never find out. If he's made to own it, it will be done to him by people in the party moving against him, quite potentially the right wingers, not just the left. So what do you think, Damo? Is there any prospect whatsoever that Keir Starmer is going to actually hold it? Well, I'll just throw this in. We were looking at when the Hartlepool discussion was going on and the result hadn't been confirmed yet. We saw a Labour MP get up and in consecutive sentences say, well, people don't want to hear us making excuses in this election. but it is all about Jeremy Corbyn.
I mean, yeah, it is a story. He will not take responsibility for this. He said, "I will carry the can." He was saying yesterday. He won't, because if he did, with results like this, he'd already have handed his resignation in. He'd have already announced it. He hasn't. He won't. His own right wing, I fear, are going to support him. I don't think so. Anybody on the right is necessarily going to make a move against it at the moment. And I really need to hear some voices of dissent from the left saying, no, this can't go on. They need to be telling the right wingers of the party who seem to dominate things at the moment, this cannot continue. We will have no party left. This is the most dire set of results ever in my lifetime I've seen. You know, I said at the beginning of the program, anybody who didn't catch it, there's a pollster called Matt Singh who put up the 5 record swings in a Westminster by-election, and the record has stood since 1945, and that was a 12-point swing to Labour. Last night we witnessed a 23-point swing to the Tories in Hartlepool. This is off the scale kind of bad. There's just no question any leader, regardless of what party it is, should remain in post when they've overseen such an appalling set of results. And obviously, we are still seeing them come in, but the indications are there. The trends are there from what we're seeing in certain council estates in certain areas of the country and what the results are. I mean, Sunderland, for example, you know, when you watch the general election, Sunderland, always the first to declare, always Labour. There's one ward in Sunderland, 30-point swing to the Tories. Labour have lost it. There's another one that went to the Lib Dems on a similar scale. I mean, it's just the sheer scale of these losses. They're unparalleled. We've seen nothing like it before. For him to stand there and say it's Jeremy Corbyn's fault, when Corbyn held Hartlepool twice, when even in 2019 at the general election, he got a better set of results than Ed Miliband did in 2015. Any talk of mountains to climb, anybody saying it's Corbyn's fault, they're either regarding you as being thick as mince, or they're just plain lying to you.
Yes. Well, just on that point, I mean, I'll just quickly, before we go on to it, but Viran, or I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, very kind comment. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the support. And that's very kind to say. But, you know, one of the things that's just getting trotted out, I mean, I watched the kind of analysis on Sky News last night until about 4:30 in the morning. And they had one of these, kind of centrist mouthpieces on there who kept referring back, as did almost everybody had in the program, to the idea that, 2019 was the worst results in 80 years, the worst results since 1941 or whatever it is, 1930 something. And, and this is why, Keir Starmer's got this, kind of huge mountain to climb. That's the, he's digging. I've seen him carrying a shovel. I haven't seen him carrying any climbing equipment, but, that's a lie. That it's not true that it's the worst set of results I've seen. I saw 2 professors of politics on the TV, on Twitter yesterday, coming out and saying that this was factually untrue. That Labour's results in 2019 were considerably better than numerous results that had taken place in the past 80 years, and were a big step up even on large parts of what happened under Tony Blair, which the right wingers love to keep harking back to. So it's flat out nonsense, but it just gets regurgitated time and time again. Not just by the Tories and the Labour right on the media, who you would expect to be pushing that kind of crap, but nodded through or even amplified by the presenters on the TV and so on, who just repeat that as if it's a fact, and it's in danger of becoming treated as a fact when it's simply not true. And the people who know it's not true, the people who analyse political history for a living, the professors in university, have come out and said that, and yet it still gets repeated.
They don't get a platform to say it, though, do they? This is the thing. They just hammer that lie home. You hear a lie often enough, and people will just regard it as the truth, and they don't question it because they hear it all the time. So it must be true. But sadly, this is the state of current affairs, journalism, and politics in this country, that lies like that just gain traction all the time. And it's only the little independent outfits like us on Socialist Telly here that will repeatedly call it out. So, support your independent media, because they're the honest ones.
Keep going, mate. I'm going to just see if I can find those tweets for people so they can see what was actually said. May not be able to bring them up, but you talk and I'll search.
Well, I've got the Matt Singh one here. If I just bung that in there for you, yeah, it's we've been talking over this this Hartlepool business and results that are coming in from here, there, and everywhere during this show today, just to highlight just how bad things actually are for Labour, and yet you're not hearing it on the mainstream media channels. You're not hearing it from the politicians. If you're listening to the TV news, if you're listening to the people they're interviewing at the moment, the Labour figures they're getting on, anyone would think that Jeremy Corbyn was the worst thing to ever happen to the Labour Party, when actually he brought in the policies and the change and the inspiration that brought so many of us into the party. And we don't, we've lost that completely. And these results that we're seeing, these numbers that are stacking up, show that. It doesn't matter what they say on the TV. It doesn't matter what media pundit or on what channel is saying what. The numbers are what they are. These are the worst set of elections I can ever remember. And Keir Starmer has broken all records when it comes to by-election swings against them since World War II. We're just living in such a time of unparalleled damage happening to our society from the worst of all conservative governments, and absolutely no opposition to any of it, just tacit support. We're living in really, really, really quite bad times right now.
Yes, and intentionally inflicted times. I think the big danger at the moment is that while the Labour Party is allowing itself to sleepwalk to disaster, or driving itself to disaster, depending on your point of view, that the Tories are getting away with measures that will be might not be undone within our lifetime or the lifetime of our children, because the absolute shameless attack and co-opting of the structures of what is supposed to be helping our democracy function, like the press, like the broadcast media, etc., like this supposedly impartial BBC, could make it very difficult. Could put us in kind of 1984 novel type territory where the message is just allowed to go on, that any kind of thought crime against it becomes punishable. They're changing the laws to prevent protest. They are allowing the state to commit crimes against people for the sake of clamping down on what have included unions on a lot of occasions, etc. So the whole thing is being set up to become in everything but name, and potentially also in name, a fascist state, essentially.
Yeah, it's just a horrible, horrible situation. Like you say, it takes a long time to undo these things. We're still trying to, visualize a time when the policies of Thatcher get undone. We've had them. I've had them in my entire life. I was born late 70s. I've known nothing else, and still the same political ideology pervades. And it's since Tony Blair, certainly, it's not just the Tories that this thinking prevails in. It's Labour too, the Labour right. And we had such hope, such a chance to get things changed and actually offer alternatives in this country, and it's gone, completely gone, thanks to a leader that was elected on a promise that he'd keep this going, and has done the complete opposite. Starmer was elected on a sham, the 10 pledges he said he'd keep to, and he hasn't. And he wouldn't go. He wanted to bring in unity and has just driven division. It just can't be stood for any longer. And the results we've seen bear out the consequences of his actions. And it's got to change. There has to be a change, and people in the Parliamentary Labour Party, the left of that Parliamentary Labour Party, I'm referring to the Socialist Campaign Group specifically, really, members of it, you've got to speak out. You've got to demand change. You've got to demand he's got to go, or else Labour is just going to be deserted. There will be no more Labour. Things are that bad. Things are that dire. Do something about it now before it's too late.
Yes. Thank you to the other people who are putting in kind comments there about Socialist Telly. We do our best, and we really appreciate your support and the fact that we've got people still watching. But we have run considerably over the hour we were originally intending on this. I'm just going to run through the last few comments coming in. Laura McDonald, John McDonald, Laura Pidcock. I'm not sure what that's a reference to. Somebody saying Dominic Cummings is talking sense about Starmer on Twitter.
Yeah.
When Barnard Castle Cummings is the when Barnard Castle Cummings is the voice of opposition on the more than low, I believe, then it's that shows how low the once great party is sunk, really. Labour acting ahead of Conservative laws to silence Labour Party socialists. Yep, that's true. There's not much arguing with that. People asking why don't the left start a new party? I think the problem is that with the structures and the kind of first past the post system that we've got in the country at the minute, there are obvious drawbacks on that, and it would be a gargantuan effort. Could it come to the point where there's no other option? Possibly. Some people would say that we're there.
If Labour dies to death because people that need to act now don't, and this carries on for much longer, then it's where things are going to end up having to be. We're going to have to start again from scratch because Labour will be gone. It'll be back to the trade unions again to kickstart something else or get behind one of the other movements that are already underway. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's our party. As a working class person, son of a steel worker, somebody who, yes, did an office job because that was what was available at the time in Teesside. But, very much kind of, come from the working men's club background and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's our party. It's the working, it's the unions who started the party. It's the union movement, the Labour movement that started the Labour Party. And the people running it at the moment are somebody put it earlier on, the cuckoos, the interlopers who shouldn't be in it. We've seen decades now of the wrong type of people wedging themselves into the party and taking it over to, make it not a threat to the establishment's interests, essentially, as I would see it, at least anyway. And we should take that back, not just give up on it and hand it over to them, but whether it'll come to the point where there's not much option, I don't know.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm a welder. I'm a union boy from the time I left school and did an apprenticeship. I've been through I come from a working class trade. I've always been a trade unionist, and it is our party. It is the party of the trade union movement. It's the political arm of the trade union movement, frankly. But sadly, it's not run by people who come from that background anymore, and that's why I think we're in the trouble we're in.
Tom thinks it's no longer the party of the working class. I mean, I think that's true at the moment. Yeah. The working class needs to take it back, but as I and others predicted way back, that as soon as the right managed to get Corbyn out, they'd be busy walling up the doors and windows to make sure that the working class couldn't get back in as much as they possibly can secure it against working people. And I fear that's what we're seeing going on at the minute. And people asking about which forward-thinking groups and parties there are who could join with the trade unions. Well, I mean, there are a few who've sprung up, but whether they can fulfil that role or not is another question. Paul suggested that all the unions should be setting up their own TV stations. I would say that would be a good thing. Give working class people a voice. The more chance people get to hear an alternative point of view from what they get from the kind of politico-journalistic establishment in this country, the better.
I think it's right. I think the unions have got financial clout to do it, but more the merrier. Bring them on.
We also worked so hard on the Labour Manifesto 2017 to 19. I agree. I mean, that's that forget which MP it was. It might have been West Streeting again, but said on social media this morning that he felt devastated for the hardworking, kind of activists who had got out there on the doors and tried to win in Hartlepool. And somebody said to him, "What about the hardworking activists in much bigger numbers that turned out in 2017 and 2019 to and came close to winning the election?" And yet we're undermined by the very people that should have been running the party to help them to win it. And that's the tragedy, but the very opposite point right now. Rory saying kick out the cuckoos, and we will finish on this, I think, now.
It's a good hashtag.
Shamim talking about the Labour Party being toxic and the need to get rid of Starmer. And I think, that's as good a note as any to finish on. I do thank everybody for taking part in the programme, for watching and for sharing where you've done that. And I will just say, obviously, again, if you want to support Socialist Telly, then as it says on here, do make sure that you, follow us on YouTube, follow us on the other social media platforms, because for the time being, at least, that's the way that we need to get the word out. And that's what we are, trying to do. And the more that, we rely absolutely on all of you guys to help us get that word out, because, there aren't enough people involved, in the production end of it to ever be able to share it as widely as it needs to go. It's entirely down to the people who support us and help us to get the word out, to spread that and make sure people see it in their social media feeds, their family and friends who might not be that politically engaged. We'll say a quick word for Damo's Patreon. Damo is one of our left stars and is working his socks off trying to, do his own job as well as on Socialist Telly of holding the establishment to account, whatever colour Rosetta wears. So have a look at his Twitter feed, etc., and find his Patreon details there if you can afford to support him. And let's Middlesbrough 82 saying I worked my backside off in 2019, and lots of people did because they believed that there was something better on offer.
Yeah, I was a branch chair in 2019. I ran the election campaign across a whole swathe of the far west of Cornwall. And here I am today twiddling with my membership card, debating on whether or not to leave it in one piece or not. This is how bad things are. It really is. Yeah. And I'm far from alone. I know I'm far from alone in it. But we will continue.
We'll wind it up there, folks, because we are back on again at about 1 o'clock with at least one person, some of the people, hopefully from Bath, where Bath and Bristol Unite Community was the first branch in the country, as far as we can tell yesterday, to nominate Howard Beckett for the leadership of the Unite Union. And that's a crucial fight. So we will see you again shortly. Hopefully you won't be too bored of seeing us, and there will be some good guests on there to tell you why those folk down in the southwest decided that they were going to support Howard Beckett and got in there so quick to make it happen. Right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you again soon. Take care.
Cheers.